Well, good evening, and it's great to be here again. I'm going to give you a talk that carries off of yesterday's talk, so let's get right to it. All right, so yesterday we uncovered the unified field of conscious civilization, and we learned that it's tied to our minds. It's not tied to empires, not to politics, not to nations, not to eras and epochs. It's not leaders, it's not regimes. It's all tied to our minds. Now let's define it. The bicameral structure built by Plato sits on all civilizations ever since, for the past 2,400 years. It even sits on all conscious, fully conscious civilizations. Now, in hierarchy, in just the nature of hierarchy, exists force. Force is inherent in hierarchy, and force constricts consciousness. In fact, it puts a cage around consciousness. We talked about this yesterday. And we could never escape it. Even America could not escape the hierarchy, the bicameral hierarchy, the cage put on consciousness. We came very close. Remember, we came very close. But here's why we could not escape it. Let me use an analogy. Let's go back 13.8 billion years to the Big Bang of the universe. Well, did you know that the odds or the possibilities of life in our universe were trillions and trillions to one? It's almost, the number is so great that it's almost impossible. Now, in any of those constants at the initial Big Bang of our universe, we're off by trillions of a fraction. We would have no life in our universe. And by the way, that's another subject that will appear in my upcoming book, Unleashed, The Promethean Promise, the power of the gods wielded by humans. But I want to compare that analogy to the Big Bang of human consciousness. At the beginning of the Big Bang, remember yesterday I talked about the axial age? And this was the Big Bang of consciousness, the axial age, Carl Jaspers, the axial age. This is when the constants of the Big Bang of consciousness formed. And one of the major constants was lost. And as I explained yesterday, that was Aristotle. So early on, the conscious universe drifted off, and full consciousness could not exist. You see, our universe, a trillionth of a fraction off, there could be no life. In our conscious universe, the loss of one constant, we could not have full consciousness. We have never had full consciousness in all of humanity. Never. Because all consciousness has been in this cage I talked about yesterday. And today, I'm going to lead us to the point that we can step out of the cage. You'll be among the first humans to have done so. You'll become a new human with a supermind. So let's move on. So this transitional structure that I talked about yesterday with the Plato, very benevolent actually, philosophical structure. Remember, Plato walked into the time when there was a lot of chaos, the wars, the Peloponnesian Wars, Athens being sacked by Sparta, witnessing his beloved mentor Socrates being executed. Back in those transitional, the axial age, societies were destroying themselves from the inside out, civilizations, and there was war and chaos because the bicameral man had lost all guidance, lost his guidance system. And that's why philosophies rose. A lot of people misinterpret philosophy as sitting around, in robes and drinking and thinking and creating these highfalutin philosophies. That's not how it formed. It formed out of desperation. And Plato's philosophy did just that. It stabilized civilization. It stabilized Athens. And it was a very benevolent philosophy. It's not, as I explained yesterday, it's not what Ayn Rand thought of Plato. You see, civilization is tearing itself apart, and he comes in and very benevolently structures society through his philosophy with consciousness being the forms, being the form of good, the form of good. That's consciousness. Well, can we get the noise down? So that's consciousness, the form of good. You see, when you understand and you decode Plato and his philosophy, you put the lens of the bicameral man, Julian Jaynes, upon history. As I said yesterday, all the pieces come together. Everything falls into place, into order. So you have Plato, he developed this philosophy with the forms. That was reality. The forms are reality. And no one can know the forms except the philosopher kings. All right, so putting the lens of the bicameral man and consciousness on history, on Plato, you realize, all right, the forms are reality. The philosopher kings, the conscious individuals of society, know reality. And I believe the form of good is consciousness itself. That's the most important form of Plato's forms. So you have the conscious people benevolently guiding those who need to have guidance. The still bicameral and the still half-conscious people who must be guided to prevent chaos and destruction. So it was a stabilizing philosophy. It was a transitional stabilizing philosophy that replaced the lost voices of the gods. And then along comes Aristotle. And remember now, by the time Aristotle came along, civilization was stable. There were no more war. He was put in an environment created by Plato, the greatest environment in antiquity of consciousness, Plato's Academy. So he can focus strictly on what consciousness really is and what it can do for humans. This was Aristotle's role as his constant in the Big Bang of consciousness. So Aristotle really got in and understood the nature of consciousness, about how it comes from the inside and we build it outward. It doesn't come from outside and constrain us, which Plato's philosophy does that and was necessary to do that as a transitional, as a bridge. But Aristotle comes in and he realizes this power in our heads can look at reality. We perceive reality through our perceptions. And then we can take those perceptions and we can integrate those into concepts. And this is how we reason and we figure out how to create value, how to see and deal with reality in the best ways. And as you know now, Aristotle's writings that were meant for the common man that were spreading and would have spread like wildfire, unfortunately, those were destroyed. This is the greatest manuscript loss in all of history, greater than the loss of, say, the Constitution, for example. Much greater. The greatest manuscript loss of any event in history. When I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, it got me emotional as a writer myself to realize what that meant and what that did to the world. And what it did, and during the Big Bang, everything's molten and flexible and shapeable. But as time went on, this molten early beginnings of the conscious universe cooled and hardened, became brittle, unshapable. And the constant of Aristotle was lost. Now, ever since this birth, the axial age, the birth of consciousness, ever since, we have known no other structure than Plato's hierarchy. Or, say, other axial age philosophers, Confucius, for example. But we have their original stabilizing philosophies. And this is something that's puzzled historians and psychologists, how we still operate off of those originals. Well, what I just described, that little metaphor with the Big Bang, explains why. Because the structure cools and it locks into place. And the original constant were lost, so we can't go back now and change things. What happens is it becomes knowledge outside of ourselves. We know nothing else. We can't know what we don't know. It'd almost be equivalent to us trying to figure out what's beyond our universe. We just don't know and we can't know. At least not now. And this is how it's been throughout all history. They don't know. And even when we got to the point where we had the shot, a legitimate shot of changing the conscious universe, and that was the founding of America, the founding fathers still could not step outside of the universe, of the conscious universe, into another universe, something never seen before. I've come to understand why that is and how that happened. For one thing, the founders did not have access to some modern thinking tools that I have. That is, they did not have access to Carl Jaspers and the axial age identification. And they didn't have access to Julian Jaynes and the bicameral mind theory or discovery. I had that. So I was able to, through a large neothink process, a large neothink puzzle building process, I was able to step outside of the only conscious universe that we've ever known. And that's the hierarchical structure. Even when the American founders put into place the most effective tools ever put into place for removing the force out of government, they still did not remove the hierarchical structure itself. So, whereas for the first 150 years it worked beautifully, like the other golden ages, I talked about the golden age of Islam, I talked about Pax Romana, I talked about the Enlightenment, with the apex of that being the American founding. I talked about the Renaissance. But I also talked about the loop. And we were always pulled back because when you have the hierarchical structure on civilization, there comes a point where the external authority is going to end or crush the internal authority that's rising. Because once everyone has internal authority, they no longer need external authority. So those in power know that, and they aren't going to let that happen. And that's what happened to America, by the way. The Founding Fathers, and it did baffle me for quite some time, why they didn't get the prime law. But I understand it now. You have to see the unified field of conscious civilization in order to see outside of the conscious universe as we know it today. I was able to do that with the help of Julian Jaynes and Carl Jaspers. And of course, my neo-think mind, my integrating mind. So Plato's philosophy spread around the world. The transitional hierarchical structure meant to stabilize a largely unstable bicameral civilization. And as I said, everything cooled and hardened, and that's what we had from then on. We've also learned yesterday that the nature of hierarchy is embedded with force. And we realized by going through history that wherever the force rose, the prosperity and health of the humans sank. And wherever force was pushed down, as in Pax Romana, as in the Golden Age of Islam, as is the Enlightenment, as in America, well, the prosperity of the humans rose dramatically. The hierarchy was always there. And look at that. Here we had America, but then in the 20th century, and by the way, without the hierarchy, the whole world would have followed. They tried, the French Revolution, but that ended up going bad eventually. And you had revolutions all throughout South America who were following the American model. But still, the hierarchy, Plato's hierarchy, the bicameral structure was still there, not fully removed. And that led to what? The bloodiest century we've ever had in the 20th century. So without removing the structure itself, we will always fail. And now we have nuclear power that can annihilate, can eliminate the human species. So the 20th century was the bloodiest. The 21st century could be our extinction if not for what we're doing right now. So we need to stay connected on this, and we need to allow this to spread. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. Okay, so as I said, the founders, they were incredible neo-thinkers, by the way. They brought to the world what no one else had seen before by codifying the Enlightenment principles, not fragmenting them and just trying this here and that there. They brought it all together and codified it. That's why we had the greatest time in all of human history was America, particularly those first 150 years. So by removing now this hierarchical structure that pulled America, we're still the greatest country in the world by far, but we are losing our freedom. We are losing our sovereignty. We're doing fine right now, but again, with the nuclear threat over our heads, the nuclear decision threshold, which, by the way, my father is the person who came up with that expression, shortly followed by Carl Sagan. But the nuclear decision threshold, well, we have to pull the bicameral structure off of society, lift that cage off of conscious civilization, off of our consciousness. So here are the components to explain this. One, neothink, the integrating mind. That's one component. Two, artificial intelligence, the rapid integrating tool for the neothink mind. Three, the prime law, to lift the bicameral hierarchical structure off of civilization, lift the cage off of consciousness. And four, Neovia. Now, I think most of you are familiar with Neovia, but for those who aren't, Neovia is our effort. Myself and Wallace are focused heavily on this right now. Our effort to start a zone that is governed by the prime law. In other words, absolute freedom. Well, excuse me. Is that you or is that somebody outside?
They're chatting outside in the driveway.
Okay. So Neovia is a zone that we're working very hard to obtain. This would be a place where we can function off the prime law. When you bring it all together, we'll have neothink minds working with this rapid integration tool of AI, living in a place where there is no hierarchical structure, no force. Force is removed. Remember, for those of you who don't know, and I'll just say one sentence, approximate the prime law. It's a formal 111-word document, but the one sentence is that no person, group of persons, or government may initiate force, threat of force, or fraud against any individual self, property, or contract. That's the prime law. That's what the Founding Fathers missed. And once you hear and see it, it is so simple and so obvious. That's why I struggled with the fact that our founders did not find this. But now I realize it's truly, you have to step outside of the hierarchical structure. You have to say, wait, we have no state, we have no government. How is that even possible? You see, it requires new knowledge. So, in this Neovia, just to give you a little glimpse or an idea, it will bring out naturally neothink minds, not following minds, because of the freedom that's afforded us. In other words, when we think in this structure, we're thinking like the scientists I brought up to you yesterday. They're thinking, how am I going to get past this regulation? How am I going to get this funding? In this structure, this bicameral-like structure, that's how their minds function. And I was dumbstruck by this when I talked to them. As I mentioned yesterday, I thought they'd be saying, oh my gosh, we're working on this acceleration of this molecule. That's where I thought our conversation would go. But it's like, no, we're not doing anything right now. We have the path, we know what to do, but we don't have the funding. I'm spending all my time trying to get funding. So that's where the mind goes in that other structure. The structure has always sat on society. Now you know why I call it the cage on our consciousness. Well, in Neovia, your mind will stop working from the outside in and being suppressed and held down. And it will start working from the inside out. the way Aristotle meant for it to be, the way it's meant to be, the way you were born to be, the way civilization was designed for. It'll start working from the inside out. And I've uncovered something that I'll reveal to you today called the supermind for the new human. In fact, I call them the superhumans. And that's who I want you to become. So I'm going to launch you with the help of the evening session that will follow my talk. I'm going to help you into the supermind so you become the new superhuman. All right, are we ready? I'm going to pull out a new set of notes here to do this. Put these over here for now. Pull out the new notes. Wait, did I get them all here? Yes, okay. All right, so here again are those components coming together to create the new world of superhumans with superminds. Sorry, were you signaling me? Oh, okay.
I just walked in front of the camera.
Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, a little mishap here. All right, so we're coming together these components are going to come together to create the new world of superhumans with superminds. Component number one is the integrating neothink mind. Now, most people are held in the following mode. You know, I've talked a lot about the following mode, but I just want to make a point here. Most people don't know it. They just don't know it. Just like Socrates, remember we talked about him yesterday, would walk around and when he would talk to his interlocutors about what they knew, subjects of whatever justice or peace or whatever education, whatever their discussion was, and they thought they knew. They thought they were internal agency. They thought they created the reality from the inside out. But as Socrates would talk to them, they would be left empty and feeling actually quite upset, sometimes angry, because they realized their thoughts were inherited from around them or adopted from philosophies or tradition passed down. They realized after having this conversation with Socrates that no, these were not their own unique thoughts. So people will become amazed at how they have lived in the following mode and didn't even know it. Component number two. This is a big one. AI, the rapid integration tool. Now, this takes the neothink mind to another whole level. It lifts it up into that supermind I'm talking about. So we'll get into that a little bit more, and I'll give you an example of myself to show you just how powerful this is. It's not just AI by itself. I mean, that's one thing. That's valuable. But AI, believe it or not, can become an external authority very quickly. But when you understand, when you have a neothink mind and understand internal agency and integrating, you can do amazing things with AI as your assistant. Component number three is the prime law. This lifts the bicameral hierarchical structure off of civilization. It lifts the cage off the conscious civilization, off the conscious mind. But to enact the prime law, we need the fourth component, and that's Neovia, which I talked a little about. It's a place where the neothink mind of the future is linked with the integration super accelerator AI, protected by the prime law, in the location of Neovia, and it brings it together, all those components, for the supermind of the future to thrive, creating the new superhumans. So the components will come together with our efforts unlocking a Neovia zone, and we'll keep you updated on our progress with Neovia. The world of the new humans with new minds and the new freedom of the prime law is coming. Let's look closer at the convergence. When the human mind breaks through the cage. For 2,400 years, humanity has lived inside that cage that it could not see. Even our founding fathers could not see the cage. It was mental architecture. It wasn't political. It wasn't regimes or leadership. It was a mental architecture formed and dropped on all civilizations. It's a hierarchical, bicameral structure that trained humans to look outward for authority, to look outward for permission, for validation and command. Civilization did not merely organize around this structure, it embedded it into the human psyche. You see, the scientists, right? They stop. No more moving forward, just looking for funding. I mean, look, some of them are going to be watching this, so I don't mean this as an attack on them, but my reaction is how pathetic. And I'm not blaming them per se. It's the whole structure that no one sees, right? Until now, you're the first. You are the first to truly understand this. And so, consciousness stalled. It never became full consciousness. Remember, I said at the initial Big Bang of the conscious civilization, the constant was lost. So we did not have a universe, a conscious universe, that could harbor full consciousness. Yeah, brilliant minds appeared, genius flickered, but the integrated mind, the fully self-led, self-authoring, reality-integrating mind never became the norm. It remained rare, fragile, and easily crushed by the systems built to reward obedience, not integration. Remember the scientists. So what is happening at this moment today will change all of that with a convergence. 4 forces arising simultaneously for the first time in history. Each alone is powerful, but together they change the human species. Let's look more closely. Component number 1, the integrating neothink mind that can now scale. That's the key, can now scale. The neothink mind is not a belief system. It's not an ideology. It's not a philosophy to memorize. It is a way the mind operates once it learns to integrate reality instead of submitting to authority. Remember yesterday I called it an operating system of the mind. For the first time, the human mind is trained to hold vast, multi-domain information without fragmentation. This is what I'm doing with the unified field, for example. The mind is trained, the neothink mind is the human mind is trained to integrate history, psychology, economics, science, ethics, and strategy into one coherent internal model. And it's being trained to self-lead without needing an external voice to tell it what is true, good, or possible. This is the end of the borrowing mind. Most of us are borrowing our philosophy, our mode of living, our mode of thinking, our operations day to day. We're borrowing it from tradition, from around us, what we heard, what we saw, what we follow. The following mode. Most people have no idea that they live on borrowed or inherited thinking from the world around them. Again, that's what Socrates was undoing, but he was undoing it one person at a time. Very slow, very slow. The neothink mind replaces compliance with comprehension. It replaces reaction with integration. It replaces belief with seeing for oneself. A neothink mind does not just follow rules, it understands causality. It does not obey, it knows. Remember, well, I've told you that I knew that Julian Jaynes was absolutely correct. in his theory. 50 years ago, I knew it, even though the academe have not recognized Julian Jaynes. In fact, I've known the unified field of conscious civilization for decades, and you'll see little bits and pieces of those throughout my manuscript. But I never fully brought it out to the world because I would have had to devote my entire life to the research to develop the evidence to prove the unified field of conscious civilization. But now, within 2 months, I brought it all together, and it will be released in a few weeks. That's Unleashed, my next Neothink manuscript. Why? Because of this new superpower of AI and making AI work for the integrating mind, not as an external authority, but as an assistant to myself. Okay, so for most of history, this kind of mind, referring to the Neothink mind, was too slow to scale. Integration took years. That's what I was just expressing to you. It would have taken me my entire life to have developed the evidence and done the research to prove the unified field of conscious civilization. I scaled with AI and did it in 2 months. It's a 900-page Neothink manuscript. It's an incredible piece. In fact, it's the most important Neothink manuscript I've ever written or put together with the help of AI. Now that's saying a lot, considering Super Puzzle took me 9 years to write. 9 years. This took me 2 months. And it's the most important book that the Neothink Society will be putting out in our 50-year existence. Why is it the most important? Because it's going to release the new human on this planet. So that limitation I talked about, how it was too slow to scale the Neothink mind, it's gone. It's gone. Now it's gone. The Neothink mind now can scale. And I'm going to get you doing this. You wait and see. Component number 2 is AI, the integration accelerator. So realize AI is not intelligence replacing human beings. It is integration replacing fragmentation. For the first time, the human mind is no longer forced to choose between depth or breadth, speed or accuracy, vision or detail. AI collapses the time required to integrate reality. What once took decades now takes weeks. Remember, it would have taken my whole life to develop to create what I'm going to have available to you in a few weeks. It took me less than 2 months. What once required teams now requires a single mind. Yes, I would have used teams to have done what I've done with my own mind, single mind. What once fractured under volume now strengthens under creativity, under complexity. Sorry. So what that means is, as I started bringing this all together, it became enormously complex what I was doing. Suddenly I had over 1,000, approaching 2,000 pages that I needed to pare down and streamline. Enormous complexity. But the more complex it got with this tool of AI, the more it strengthened. It was unbelievable. AI does for Neothink for the neothink mind what machines once did to human labor. AI does not think for the neothink mind, by the way. It thinks with the neothink mind. It becomes the rapid integrating mirror, feeding back patterns, inconsistencies, historical echoes, and unseen connections at machine speed. The human remains the meaning maker, the value chooser, the author of direction. So instead of calling it artificial intelligence, I want to call it something else. Let's call it, for the neothink mind, let's call it augmented integration. And for the first time, the integrated human mind can scale, revealing a new supermind. So back to my example, as I said, for decades, I've pondered about this structure by Plato. I remember when Ayn Rand called him the most evil man who ever lived, and I remember feeling, and I love Ayn Rand, I absolutely love her. But I remember feeling I don't agree with that. But I had no way to go in and prove this other than a right brain sense from the extensive reading and studying I had done, that there was something different here. And those of you who have read some of my literature know, for example, how I address Jesus in the three insights. This is all part of my neothink integration, my neothink mind. But now, with my augmented integration with AI, I could bang out the proof, the evidence. I just had to direct it. And yes, I know about hallucinating and all of that, AI hallucinating, so I'm very careful about that. And yes, that's just a little side note, a sidebar. But for decades, I knew it, but I had no way to prove it, to provide the evidence until AI, and I said in less than 2 months. Okay, component number 3, the prime law, removing the cage. This is what it's going to take to remove that cage, to remove the hierarchical structure off of civilization. It's going to require the prime law. That's the only way to remove it. Even the greatest minds, they collapse when trapped inside coercive systems. Again, the scientists. History proves this relentlessly. Yesterday, you saw that whenever integration threatened hierarchy, the Golden Ages, Pax Romana, the Golden Age of Islam, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, America, well, you saw that eventually hierarchy crushed integration. Today and then tomorrow, on your own, you will unleash the supermind in you. But first, we need to talk about the prime law a little bit more, and then about Neovia. So the prime law changes this limitation, the cage, permanently. Again, no person, group of persons, or government may initiate force, threat of force, or fraud against any individual, self-property, or contract. No, the prime law does not regulate behavior. It simply removes coercion. It removes the negative. It lifts the ancient bicameral structure off civilization, the structure that trained humans to submit upward rather than to integrate inward. For the first time, no authority may override consciousness. No hierarchy may replace self-ownership. This is completely new thought. It's new thought. And it's outside of anything ever seen before, and why our founding fathers missed it. Once the cage on civilization and consciousness is removed, something extraordinary happens. The human mind does what it was always meant to do. It integrates. And with AI, the neothink mind advances into the supermind. Now let's hit component number 4 before I get into releasing your supermind. Component number 4, we must make these components very clear because this is the key to our future for saving the planet from nuclear holocaust, okay? We must start with Neovia. Neovia will start and it will be a zone. That's what we're working on, a zone. And as the advantages swell so dramatically and there's no more hierarchy to protect itself and start shutting it down, it will so outdo all neighboring lands, nations, that it will create a suction sound. And the idea is to, once we have this proof of concept just thriving, other countries are going to want to bring in the prime law. I even have hopes that America will add the prime law as an amendment to the Constitution, as the 28th Amendment. It would instantly fix all the problems we have today because anything that is initiating force can't pass through that amendment, which means all those regulations that are stopping those scientists I keep talking about, because that's very dear to my heart, is curing age-related diseases. So the new mind, mind you, cannot fully emerge in the old world. Okay, I'm going to call everything until now the old world, because my mind's in the new world now. Every prior awakening failed there in that old world. Brilliant ideas were born, but forced to survive inside these hostile environments designed for obedience, not self-authorship. Even the strongest minds bent, most broke. Neovia changes this. Neovia will be a habitat for consciousness. I call it the new world. So you have the old world, that's everything until now. And we have the new world, that's what's coming with Neovia. It will be the first place on earth where the neothink mind is enabled and the prime law protects it. This is where the 4 components that I've been discussing lock together and make the new world unstoppable, unlike any time before it. Remember, always before it, anything good, not pulled back down. Nothing can pull this back down. Unleashed. In Neovia, the supermind of the future is the standard. Children grow up integrating instead of obeying. Creators build without permission. Scientists explore without bureaucratic paralysis. Entrepreneurs move at the speed of thought. This, what I'm describing, is post-cage humanity. Now, let's observe the emergence of the new human. What happens when minds integrate instead of fragment? Integration accelerates without coercion. Freedom is structurally protected, and an environment, an entire environment, reinforces self-leadership. What happens? Well, a new human emerges. I'll just name him right here, the superhuman. Not genetically engineered, not artificially enhanced, but consciously liberated. Consciousness unleashed. These superhumans think in systems, not slogans, act from internal authority, not fear, create value naturally and abundantly because they understand causality. They cooperate voluntarily because coercion is unnecessary. They are not ruled and they do not rule. They self-govern. This is the superpower that civilization has been waiting for and suppressing for millennia. Let's look at the world after the cage is removed. It took new thought to get here. And once this model exists, it cannot be contained. Neovia renders the old world obsolete. The old world built on hierarchy will get increasingly left behind, stuck in a simple competitive disadvantage: compliance versus creativity. And the outcome, well, I'm sure you can guess, is inevitable. The future does not belong to those with power. It belongs to those with integrated minds. None of this has to do with the next political era, for politics, well, they vanish. Politics vanish. It takes the new mind to see and embrace this new knowledge. This is the end of humanity's long detour through submission and the beginning of consciousness and of consciousness ascent unleashed. We went through that huge detour yesterday. Today, I'm talking about the future, where it's coming, and I'm going to take you and I'm going to push you into the future here. So for the first time, the cage is lifting. For the first time, the human mind is finally free to become what it was always meant to be. Now, I want you to wake up tomorrow morning with a supermind. Yes, starting tomorrow. I want you to take what Wallace will deliver this evening, your golden life sheet with your $1 million vision. And I want you to put that into your new supermind, starting when you wake up tomorrow morning. Here's how. I want you to study your vector that he talked about yesterday. I want you to study that tonight, your vector. And I want you to begin to integrate your path using your neothink mind. And I know you, the people here, are capable of that. I know that many of you are in the neothink mentality already. Now, what I just described to you, thinking about this vector and how to get there, what is that? Where's the chat? Someone tell me what that is. When you are thinking about the future and bringing it back to you today, what is that? I'm looking at the chat. Anyone? Or am I? Oh, there it is. Power thinking. Power thinking. Right? Power thinking. That's when you look ahead and you have a vision. And you don't try to go from here to there. I believe Wallace explained this yesterday. You go from out there and work your way back. What project will accomplish this, and then what project will accomplish that? You get all your projects lined up, and then you break those projects down into tasks. And those tasks are physical tasks. And those of you who are familiar with the Mini-Day Power Thinking team, you know what you do with those physical tasks, right? You plug them in and you move through them at outrageous, as Steve Jobs would say, at insane speeds. All right, so at this time tomorrow, I want you to work with AI, okay? I want you to take your power thinking of your golden life sheet that Wallace, now make sure you're alert and energized for the next session, because this is bringing everything together that you've heard over the last 2 days, and it's turning it into a tool to operate from or with. And I want you to then put the integration accelerator onto that. It's very exciting what's going to happen, because you're going to release your supermind. You're going to use, first of all, you're going to create this golden life sheet with your $1 million vision. And I've seen Wallace do this before, and it's my favorite part of the Day of Enlightenment, to be honest with you. It's moving, it's emotional, and it's self-discovery at another level. So I want you to take this golden life sheet and this power thinking of your vector and start putting those integrations that you are making through your power thinking. I want you to put those into AI. You can do it as a question or questions. You could do it as comments. You can do it as directives. Just start doing it. And you will open up something you've never experienced before. Because now you're in charge. You're not just receiving external direction at all. You're in charge. You're the neothink mind, and you're waking up your supermind by accelerating the integration process. By taking what Wallace is going to give you this afternoon and start plugging that into AI tomorrow. I don't want you to do it tonight. I want you to sleep, rest, get ready, because once this supermind explodes, it's hard to stop. You can ask my sons. They have seen me just buried in my integrations with AI. Taking up the whole kitchen, taking up the dining room. The office is already buried. Once you get into the supermind, man, there's no stopping it. So this integration accelerator is going to release your supermind with you using Neothink along the way. And I have a note here that says, okay, this is an important note. Your integrating power will go off the charts. Goodbye, following mode. That's a huge statement. Goodbye, following mode. Wow. Most of us don't realize it, but most of us have lived in the following mode all our lives. If I were Socrates and I were to walk through our members here and I used the Socratic approach, a lot of you would be surprised and dismayed at how much the following mode controls us. So when I make a statement, and you know when I make statements, they're fully integrated honesty. When I make a statement that huge, goodbye following mode, it's life-changing, absolutely life-changing. So the experience, well, it'll rock you to your core. And I speak that with personal experience. I call it your thunderstruck moment. Suddenly, you will know that your golden life sheet with your $1 million vision is for the first time achievable. You will manifest your $1 million vision once you free your supermind, your Neothink supermind, with the augmentation integrator AI. Oh, by the way, with AI, because there's maybe some people here who don't have AI, it's very easy. You just download the apps. I personally use ChatGPT, and I do pay the monthly fee because I need the enhanced power that I get from that. But it's free. For you don't necessarily have to pay the monthly fee for that. And my wife particularly likes Grok. That's Elon's AI. But there's several. There's Claude. There's a number of different AI now. But just download the app, and usually it's free. Some you pay. So when you experience the release of your Neothink mind as it rises up into the supermind with this assistant AI, you'll feel overwhelming glee. I guarantee you will feel overwhelming glee, and not to mention power, benevolent, good power, because you're a neo-thinker at a high level. So major things are going to happen in your life. It's unstoppable. See, this is unleashing your conscious power. So it's quite the emotional experience. I do want you to pay very close attention to the afternoon session, or the evening session, the evening session, the night session, we'll call it now, the night session with Wallace. This is going to give you the tool to release within yourself the new human. This night session is where everything you learned the past 2 days all integrates together into your golden life sheet with your $1 million vision. It's when the entire universe, your entire universe, comes together to unleash your big bang of your consciousness. So from your golden life sheet, that single sheet of power, well, after a good night's sleep, I want you tomorrow morning to do your power thinking that Wallace taught you yesterday. I want you to feed those integrations, and I want to hear back from you. I really do. I want to know what happens to you, because I know what happened to me. I know what that's like. It's a new life. It's an absolutely new life. I plan to accomplish more now in the next decade than I did in the last 4.5 decades. Mark my words, Wallace. Mark my words. I will accomplish more in the next decade than many times more than I did in the past 4.5 decades.
All right.
And when you join me with this new mind, and I do want to hear back from you, this super mind, you become the new human. And for those of you now in Stargazer, well, first of all, congratulations. You're going to be very, very happy that you rose to level 3. You are soon to be new human with a super mind, and there'll be nothing that can stop you because you will have all of our leverage working with you, including my leverage. And that's huge. I'm very protective of my time, but with the Stargazers, I do spend a lot more time than with anyone else. So good night, everyone. That's it. That covers my notes. I want you to turn up your energy now to tackle the night session. This is the most important segment of the 2 days, the night session, as we pull everything together into your golden life sheet with your $1 million vision. So thank you. Thank you, and it's been a pleasure. Good night, everyone.